good morning, good afternoon, whatever your time is. May it be good and may it be supernatural. And sometimes it takes a while to get an answer to our prayers. I'm going to share with you 9 times that Jesus shows up and shows off at midnight. Remember, when you pray, God's answer may be a yes, a no, or sometimes we have to wait until midnight, the midnight hour. While we are waiting, there are some things we could be doing. So let's just look. I want you to look with me at some special things. Death of the firstborn, Exodus 11:4. And Moses said, "Thus saith the Lord, about midnight I will go out into the midst of Egypt." Wow. 12:29 is Exodus, and it came to pass that at midnight the Lord smote all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh that sat on the throne unto the firstborn of the captive that was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of cattle. Oh, dramatic, traumatic. God sometimes waits to judge the ungodly until the midnight hour, but he can judge any time he sees fit. So Samson performed a miracle. Judges 16:3. And Samson lay still till midnight, and arose at midnight, and took the doors of the gates of the city, and the 2 posts, and went away with them, bar and all, and put them on his shoulders, and carried them up to the top of the hill that is before Hebron. Interesting that God wakes up Samson at that time. It was an opportune time to do this deed as everyone else was sleeping. So sometimes we don't know what the opportune time is, but we can trust God that he does. Boaz discovered Ruth, Ruth 3:8. And it came to pass at midnight that the man was afraid and turned himself, and behold, a woman lay at his feet. Boaz discovered Ruth laying at his feet was the beginning of a line of people who would become a part of Jesus' lineage. God likes to do things at this late hour, and it always has a purpose. But it bothers me. I think, God, you always have to be so last minute. Then in 1 Kings 3:20, she arose at midnight and took my son from beside me while thine handmaid slept, and laid it in her bosom, and laid her dead child in my bosom. That's an ugly thing, wasn't it? Again, the mother whose child was taken was asleep, and did not notice it was not her child who was taken until the morning. When morning came, she knew the child who was in her arms was not hers. Solomon, in his wisdom, made this situation right by telling one of his soldiers to cut the baby in half. The real mother stopped and was willing to give the whole child to the other mother because of her love for the child. We may be in a midnight crisis, but we can depend on God to make it right. I'm going to read that again. We can depend on God to make it right. David, in Psalm 119:62, at midnight I will rise to give thanks unto thee because of your righteous judgment. When you wake up at midnight, remember what you're going to do. You're going to give thanksgiving. You're not going to be depressed. At midnight, the bridegroom took his bride. And this is interesting in Matthew 25:6. And at midnight, there was a cry made, "Behold, the bridegroom cometh." So you go out and meet him. As I said, sometimes God is last minute. I don't like last minute things, neither do you. But I'm glad to have them, period. I have heard that Galilean weddings, only the father knows when the couple can be married. Many times the Father will give his approval at a late hour, and when he does, the bride has to be ready. This sounds very much like the rapture or the catching away of the church when Jesus comes back. So, you may not believe in it, but this seems interesting to me, and I think you should consider it. Paul and Silas prayed, Acts 16:25, and at midnight, Paul and Silas prayed and sang praises unto God, and the prisoners heard them. When you wake up at midnight, usually you just depressed. But could you sing praises? Could you do the opposite? And this shows the power of praise. For this incident, their chains fell off and they were set free. Sometimes praising is all we can do in a critical situation. But wow, honey, look at the benefit. Paul preached Acts 20, verse 7. And upon the first day of the week, when the disciples came together to break bread, Paul preached unto them, ready to depart on the morrow, and continued his speech until midnight. I think sometimes we think, sometimes people go on too long. In third world countries, I'm going to tell you, this is not unusual to have services that last for hours and hours. In our Western culture, we are used to a 2-hour service. Giving the Holy Spirit time to move is very essential to experience the power. And so I'm trying not to be impatient, because I can be very impatient. It was at midnight that land was discovered. Acts 27:27. But when the 14th night was come, as we were driving up and down on the Adrian Sea, about midnight, the shipmen deemed that they drew near to some country. Last minute, isn't it? Last minute. He can easily, now listen to me, come into your darkest hour and when least expected. Mark 13:35. Watch therefore, for you do not know when the master of the house cometh, at even or at midnight, or at the cock crowing, or in the morning. Folks, let's don't give up. Let's don't fall apart. Let's don't have a nervous breakdown. And remember, don't forget, send your prayer requests to MarilynandSarah.org.